Hello and welcome to the latest episode of Staying Sane with Jay and Hussein. I'm
Hussein.
Jay
Yeah,
and this is
I'm
Hussein.
Hussein. Yeah.
Yeah. So thanks for everybody for tuning in. Well, we have one so far, so we got one person watching, so thank you for that. All right, so let's jump straight into the news. So this week we quite a few things going on in the US. We've got three stories from the US this week. So following up on the story from last week when Idaho had made it mandatory to post the Ten Commandments. Now Oklahoma is getting into the situation, and the evangelical nut job who runs things in Oklahoma is now requiring that the Bible be taught in all schools. So characteristically, the Freedom from Religion Foundation is going to be challenging them. In the one of the news articles I read, even other religious groups are upset with this evangelical person in Oklahoma saying, you're shoving your beliefs down everybody's throats in Oklahoma, and even the other religious groups are saying, hey, this is not right. Um, and then in the Supreme Court this week overturned an Idaho ban on most abortions, allowing them in cases of emergencies. So, as we saw within the last year or two, the Supreme Court had overturned Roe v. Wade. They are expressing some rational thought, and they're not being completely evangelical by banning all the abortions like when they reverse Roe versus Wade, but they're at least allowing women in Idaho who to save their life to have them. So they've reversed the Idaho bans. And then finally in the U.S., the former Trump spiritual advisor Robert Morris has admitted to molesting children. So he has resigned from the Gateway Church in Texas. So is it any wonder that someone associated with Trump is another one is now going to jail? So over to you, Hussein, with what's going on in your part of the world.
Yeah, perfectly fine, except a few items here from here. But just before going into that, I have a find out there that's something related to the presidential election and the debates and some news about the prosecution and arresting and other legal aspects which is going on in US, where framing individuals uh, in the US who is about to contest in the US elections this way that you have seen multiple instances. Do you think that's something that can be allowed in a, or that is something which is reasonable in a democracy? Do you think that US
Sorry.
democracy is going down?
It's definitely under threat right now with Trump,
Mm-hmm.
who does not concede the elections. I mean, this
Mm-hmm.
is how democracy works, right? You have an election and then you have a peaceful transition from one to the other. And we
Yeah.
saw with Trump in what 2020, I guess it was, where
Mm-hmm.
he refused to concede. Apparently, in the debate that was held this past week,
Mm-hmm.
I believe the question was put to Trump, will he accept the 2024 election results? And apparently he dodged the question.
Yeah.
So I think democracy in the U.S. is definitely under some threat. I mean, I think the U.S. Constitution is fairly robust. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and you have enough people in the U.S. with common sense and who have sworn to defend the Constitution that I don't think it's in any real danger.
Okay.
I think if Trump ever really crossed the line, you know,
Mm-hmm.
like back in 2020, like there was something like he was gonna like call on the military to support him. I'm like, yeah, sorry, dude. Officers in the U.S. military, their oath is to defend the Constitution, not the
Mm-hmm.
president. So,
Okay. So definitely there will be some kind of these legal issues.
oh yeah,
Yeah. Okay.
yeah.
Anyway, coming back to India.
Rule of law will take precedence over any of this partisan
Okay.
bullshit that's going on.
Okay. So let's hope the democracy will be in its good shape always. Okay. So now coming to India or the news from this part, that's something related to a hijab ban where a high court refused to interfere in a hijab ban that was or a kind of rule that was imposed in a college, two colleges in Mumbai, that is the financial capital of India. And the key point where the High Court was making this decision is the college wanted to impose a restriction on the display of religious symbols, be it from just Islam or it from be from Hinduism or any other religion. So it was a blanket restriction that was imposed on all religious symbols, including hijab, face covers, hats, stoles, and all other things.
So
And
does
among all,
does this apply to Sikhs as well, and the turbans that Sikhs wear,
uh,
or was this
except that,
directed only at the Muslims?
except that.
They got exempted.
Yeah,
Ah, well, that's
six.
interesting.
Yeah, six are getting that kind of an exemption because that's something that is mentioned in the constitution itself, and that is something that as Indians and as secularists, we are looking for to get it removed from the constitution. Maybe in the near future, where we can even when you speak about the helmets, you can see that Sikhs are exempted from wearing a helmet. You can just imagine. So this is the
Yeah,
kind of exemption that they have. They are getting, and they are even allowed not to wear a helmet, and they get a free run in the road. Uh, and just imagine how they are vulnerable to the head injuries while when they are riding a bike. So
yeah,
a religious symbol versus a protective gear. That's how it goes here, and the upper hand is for the religious gear. So,
yeah.
so for Sikhs, it is well understood, and it's there for more than many years here. So that never comes into a debating point as a debating point in India. So apart from the turbans of the Sikhs, you have many other things from Hinduism, from Christianity, from the Islamic religion, and all other religions. So this time, when it came to this college uniform, this ban was imposed, or this restriction was imposed, and among them, only the Muslim girls they chose to approach the court to get a to lift this restriction, and they were failing over there because the court took a stand, not just by the current events, but they took a precedent from the previous hijab event that was happening in Karnataka. That's almost 2 years ago, where a few schools in Karnataka, they were also coming up with this kind of restrictions for religious symbols in their schools. So during that legal battle that went over more than a year, even the Supreme Court came up with a rule which they clearly mentioned that the Muslim or the legal side who were fighting for the Muslims, they were not able to give them a clear picture where they could prove that hijab was an essential practice. They were not able to prove that. So,
Right.
citing that, it was overturned, and they were not able to lift, or they were not able to stay the imposition or this restriction. So that's how it went in Karnataka issue. So this time the High Court took that decision, and they were applying it over here and saying that the restriction that is being put forward by these colleges in Mumbai this time will stay. So they lost in the High Court. That's what happened. And now, as part of the school uniform, or as part of the college uniform, these students they must follow the school uniform, in which hijab is not a part, and it is now restricted. So that's a big win for the secularists, or a secular a place which should stay as a secular place. So,
Right.
and what I see personally here is that there's always an attempt made by the Islamic side where they always try to leak in the Islamic Sharia, or their kind of hijacking, a way of hijacking the secular arenas, whereby they first bring in Islam over there, and they are just giving a chance for other religions to just bring in theirs too. That's what is happening here. So, in that point of view, this rule, this High Court judgment now is a big win. That's what I would say. Thank
Just a
you.
quick question. So,
Yeah.
in like, so and others who watch regularly know, I've worked in Pakistan before. Lots of Muslim women in Pakistan don't wear any kind of head covering, hijab, anything. Some do, some don't. I presume the Indians, sorry, the Muslims in India are the same. It's a choice. It's not a requirement that they be covered. That there are Muslim women in India who don't choose to wear a hijab.
It's
Yeah.
like, people do have a choice in selecting their hijab, whether to wear or not. But When it comes to a college or an institution, educational institution like this, what happens is they just completely ignore the college uniform, and they wear the uniform, and they will be wearing a burqa over it, and it's very difficult to identify them. That's what happens. So the degree or the level of covering up increases. Okay,
Right.
so that's causing a little bit trouble over there. That's what is happening, and at that point, and now when we speak about this college and all this incident happened in a place where the management or the college were non-Muslims. That's one side that we should understand or we should recollect here, because a few months ago there was a similar incident that happened in another state where a school management wanted to bring such a rule in their school, and that happened to be a school governed by a Muslim management. So what happened was there was no cry over that. There was no news about that. Everything was fine. So that's one level of reaction that happens in an Islamic setting. We know that the cry over such banning and such restrictions always comes when it is being done by someone other than a Muslim background, from a Muslim background. Whether it's always the right wing is causing us trouble, they are chasing us, it is genocide. These are the things which they always come up with. So that's not happening this time. That's something different here now. And when you say this, there's a statement that was made by Muslim girls during the Karnataka hijab trouble, and now, even now, that is, the exact statement is this: Islam is first, education is secondary. This was the term that they were using. So just imagine how indoctrinated they are with this religion. So they were upholding religion even when they were able to come out of their homes, and they were able to do their education. And even then, they were upholding religion above this education. So when they are not able to follow such secular principles or respect such secular rules, what they are really trying to do is that they are trying to, or they are literally causing a degradation to such secular existence. That's what I would say. So they are even causing the trouble to those Muslim girls who wish to see hijab as a choice, because for them, when they say it is a choice, they are they are left voiceless at this point. They are not able to come forward, and they are never able to say a word on these things. That's what happens, because those people who are fighting for, they are just warriors in this front for fighting for hijab, they are getting more attention, and their religious that kind of an existence and their vigor is getting more marketed. So that is giving other children who already see all these as a part of their dress choice and all. They are getting a complex, an inferiority complex, whereby they, from the next day onwards, or maybe in the coming days, they will just find it that we are inferior with our belief, and that's why we are not fighting along with them. So we need to be more religious, more hijabis, more everything, and it's a kind of promotion of the religion, and it's a radicalizing event that is just following afterwards. So that's one reason why we are staying against hijab tooth and nail.
As you should.
Yeah.
So you probably you may know of one of our other affiliates, AAI affiliates, David Rand, in
Mm-hmm.
Canada, he's been doing a lot of articles and talk on similar ban in Canada, where this is government, that
Mm.
if you are in a civil servant position, whether you're a bureaucrat behind
True.
a desk face, like at the driver's license office, or you're a police officer, if you are in some sort of public facing role, you're not allowed to wear religious imagery, because you could obviously, if
Yeah.
you have what do you call, if
That.
you have someone like a refugee who's
Mm.
come from a Muslim country, and suddenly you have a Muslim police officer, they could be very, very confronted. So, see, we have some call with DNA and Vicky are saying hi. Vicky's asking some questions. Vicky, we'll get to it. Where Israel's going to be on our list, so we will get to your question. Have no fear.
Very soon.
Yeah. So David has talked quite a bit about that in Canada.
It's
So,
something related
and
to that Bill 21 in Canada.
yeah,
That's
and
what we had a
he's like
discussion on our channel.
it's even like David points out like that the in Quebec like it's even less than what the regulations they have in Europe on that kind of stuff. So, but still, yeah. Okay.
Right? Yeah,
All right.
right.
So your next story.
Okay, should I go or you can
Yeah,
have
you
one
go.
and then I'll come back?
Okay. Why don't you go because yours actually leads into mine, or I could
Oh,
go and leads
okay.
into yours.
Oh, yeah.
Either way.
You're away.
Maybe okay, I'll go because it
Yeah.
leads into yours. Okay, so there's a UN meeting scheduled for Doha, may have started
Okay.
today. The Taliban have prohibited Afghan women from attending, and they have rejected having women's rights even on the agenda of the UN talk. So it's causing some consternation, and the UN has yet to reply to requests for information on that. So, and I know this then leads into your issue on women's rights.
It's a kind of legitimization of even this gender apartheid that's going on in Afghanistan. UN, so do you think that UN is powerless at this point when they are not able to make a strong stance against them and exposing the kind of gender apartheid and the kind of atrocities that they are committing against the women in Afghanistan? The UN is missing that opportunity
Well, I mean,
to make them
the
accountable.
UN have their peacekeeping forces, but again, that's not, that's based on the individual countries, and of course, it's the whole quagmire going back into Afghanistan. So, how do you hold them accountable? I mean, like, they call Afghanistan the graveyard of empires, right? Alexander fails there, the British failed there, the Americans failed there. Um, it's
But
it's a
but
mess. I
but
mean,
in modern times, can we take that as an excuse?
I I would
Because
say, I mean,
when we are so much focused on this, what is going on in Gaza, and what's going on in only we can talk about this Gaza. If they can make so much noise on that, whatever be the reason, why not even a single word or a single action is visible from their part with regards to this gender apartheid in Afghanistan? That's what
I,
I
I
always
haven't
think.
I haven't followed it closely enough to be able to
Okay.
comment on what the UN is or isn't doing regarding the Taliban, but it's obviously an issue. Like it made the news this week that the Taliban has refused to even discuss women's rights, or to even allow women to come. So yeah, it's a thorny issue. Like we've discussed previously, the the Islamic Enlightenment is probably a generation or two away. So, you know, can Afghanistan hold on and can it be a pariah in a secular world where Islam has lost so much of its support around the world? Or not support, but if many, many more ex-Muslims, if the demographic shift continues over the next few generations as we're expecting, Afghanistan cannot hold out forever. I mean, it's going to have to join the community of nations at some point in the next few generations.
Anyway, after seeing all the problems in Afghanistan, it's easy for us to point out Afghanistan as a specimen of what would happen if a population is gifted with Sharia law. So we had we have seen how the people were trying to escape from the Sharia law by even clinging on to the wings of the planes that they were trying to take off. So that's the kind of peace and the kind of progress or the hope that Sharia was able to provide them. People were fleeing literally. So in that way, I would say Afghanistan is a great specimen for the whole of humanity. So maybe I still believe the people over there deserve a better life, and for that, UN at least now, we are not. I'm not asking for a a paradigm step taken on to make something so much visible, but at least a kind of disapproval of what they have done. No, that's not being made. What all this being made, or what we are hearing, is from the rights organizations who are outside Afghanistan who are making this. So otherwise, we wouldn't have known about all this. That's that's something despicable.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Anyway, yeah. So we have
So
another
you want
one.
to
Something.
you
Yeah, yeah.
move on to
Something.
Kerala?
Yeah, from Kerala. This is, I would say, something related to a kind of a subsidiary of Taliban in Kerala. That's what I would say. Samasta is an organization, an Islamic organization, and they portray themselves as a education body, a Muslim body who makes law, who oversee all the affairs of the Muslim community in Kerala. Kerala is a state in India, so the body is called Samasta Kerala Jamiatul Ulama. That's what they call themselves. So that's a group of the scholars and the senior leaders of Islam from that kind of section, and they were formed back in 1920s. So it's that much an old organization. Even before the independence of India, they were here, and during the freedom struggle, they were siding with the British during the freedom struggle in India. So the reason for that was, uh, if the British they leave India, the rule will be taken over by the Hindus. Okay, and the Hindus are kafir. So it is British who are better because they are at least Christians, and they are the people of the book. So that so that was the stance taken by the Samasta. So I hope you get
What
an idea now. Who are they?
I mean, I know some Indian history. I'm not
Mm,
fully familiar with how the British were treating the Muslims. So under when it was the British Raj, was there relative peace between the Hindus and the Muslims? Like the British kept the religious tensions under wraps, or was there still a lot of flare-ups between the two groups?
okay. It's always cited or portrayed as something like the British was the force behind this Hindu-Muslim divide. That's what we always hearing about. Like it's what is always told. But I would say British was late in understanding that there is a constant tension between Muslims and the Hindus, which can be used for their own betterment. And they started later on. They started cashing in on that kind of a rivalry, which is inherent in that two populations, and that too, uh, first from the Muslim population, and the second from the Hindu population. That's what I would say. That's the history. What tells us. So, from the Mughal history and from all other Muslim rulers who were here, and from them, when the British took the power, it was like the Muslims and the top class Muslims, the Ashrafis and the higher castes in Islam, or the Muslims here, who were the descendants of the Mughals and that kind of people, they were always left with a feeling that we lost the power. So they were the ruling class here, the Muslims. So when they lost the power, that was a defeat for them, and they always wanted to regain that powerful position, that is the ruling position. And the only trouble was caused by the British. And when British came here, they were having good organization and they were having pretty good association where most of the leaders who were from the Hindu community were having a kind of upper hand, and they were Muslims were feeling that okay, they were going smoothly. So they wanted more representation. So a kind of a minority communalism started growing up in India. So that's the point when they started arguing for a separate nation, that's Pakistan. So that's the point when they wanted such a separate nation where Muslims will be ruling their own, a state for their own. That's what happened. From then, the nationalists from the Hindu portion, they started arguing against that, and then this became a mainstream subject. From then on, we started hearing about the right wing, the left wing, the Islamic faction having trouble, and we are still seeing that even after the partition of India into Pakistan and India. So that's
Yeah,
what we see
we know
here.
the big we know that
Yeah.
like the what's the word? The transference of the populations, the Hindus that were in Punjab coming to
Yeah,
India, Muslims going to Pakistan.
that's
What
horrible,
about
horrible events.
but but what about like the Sikhs and the Jains and the other groups in India?
Yeah.
Was there a lot of fear from those groups when the British left?
Um, in fact, that was not, or that's not well or made into a mainstream subject always. Like it's almost an irrelevant kind of subject always. That's not discussed much. Always, what is discussed is about the Hindus and Muslims. The Sikhs, they are happy with whatever things that they have. Now we talk about the Khalistanis and their problems. That's another story. And we have this problem in the POK, that's Kashmir, where again the partition and the events that went after that. That's another something which is part of that partition and the Muslim, Hindu, and other things.
So
And
like so the Sikhs didn't necessarily want to secede in 47. I mean they do now with Khalistan, like
yeah,
you
yeah,
say,
yeah, yeah.
but in 47 were they advocating for their own state as well, or they just
They
kind of
were
went along
advocating
with?
for. They were
Okay,
advocating for their own state. Yeah, but
okay.
but they were agreeing to some common points, and that's how we see them as a part of an integral part of India. So they count themselves now as a part of India, except the Khalistanis. That's what we see.
Yeah.
So
Just unrelated to news, but I thought it was really cool.
yeah,
An
yeah.
interesting demographic fact that even though we have this partition with India and Pakistan, but there's more Muslims living in India than there are in Pakistan. That fact just blew me away. Like you partition and you make a Muslim state, and yet the majority of the Muslims don't even live there.
Okay, yeah, that's a point because that's where the Samasta and all other organizations comes into play. So these people, they were in fact voting for a separate nation. Okay, even these people. But when the partition happened, they never left India. But the problem is, they are raising the same arguments even now. So this is something that is causing a trouble inside the belly, and they are even igniting the majoritarian communalism we call, or the rise of right wing in India, or it is keeping it alive. That kind of a toxic nationalistic viewpoint. That's one reason. But people always ignore all these background and they just accuse the right wing for whatever things that they are doing. They never count the reaction, that kind of an element. Where we were having this discussion even in our first episode, the rise of the right wing around the world. So, with regards to India, we have seen this rise of the right wing back in 1947 itself. That's what I'm saying, or 1920s itself. That's what I say. So that's why India is able to take some proactive steps where we are able to control this rise of the right wing. But I don't say that we are the best in this because we are still having the problems posed by the wokes, the wokey people, because they always try to water down the accusations or the problems put forward by the right wing without addressing that. And that is causing even more polarization and even more issues in the public domain. That's what, in the political scenario, that's what we see here. So if the wokes or the ultra left is not causing this trouble, things would have been easier because people would have come forward and addressed these issues where even Muslims will be safe to live in India. So that's again when we talk about this Samasta issue. The statement made by that Samasta leader is that uh, education of women must be within Islam's boundaries. That's what he said. We are okay for education, but we have some boundaries. Okay. So this is exactly what the Taliban says. But since it is in India, he's not able to say exactly what Taliban says because if he say that, he will be in trouble or he will be in the jail because that's something against the right to education, the constitutional right which every children in this country is having, and it is something against that. So he knows that. So even then, he is forced to, or he is having that urge to say this, and it's just because of the software that is Islam, and he is representing Islam. So he's saying that, and now when you track back to the history of Samasta, the same Samasta was against a total ban on education for women. So when comparing with that stance and this stance, I would say this stance is better when comparing to the the previous one, because in 1920s their stance was no education for women, but now they are saying some education for women with boundaries. So that's a pretty good an improvement, and I think that's a milestone in the history of Samasta and the whole history of Islam in Kerala and India, which the people in India can follow for the future. In the future, you'll get an idea how and why we ex-Muslims and the science promoters and the rationalists and secular activists are voicing against Islam, because Islam, what it teaches is exactly what Taliban is doing in Afghanistan. So that's a specimen, and you are seeing some versions of that, or you are seeing the same colors in our state. So Samasta is Taliban. It's a Kerala version or Indian version of Taliban. That is so that's it.
Okay.
Yep.
All right. So our next news story. So we're going to go out of the U.S. and go international. Let me pull up my notes here and just minimize this a little bit. Okay. So the next story. This one made me laugh. This actually showed up in my feed from the Filipino atheists. The a Philippine archbishop is asking Filipinos to pray the rosary in order to protect them from atheist China. And I saw that, and it just made me howl with laughter. I thought, okay, we got to put this in the news roundup just for some levity because it's so funny. At least I think it's really funny that some Filipino archbishop thinks praying is going to protect them from the Chinese and the atheist
Mm.
Chinese. So, um, speaking of Catholics, so an ultra traditional radical Catholic. He's a retired nuncio, the diplomatic ambassadors of the Vatican to the U.S. He's Archbishop Vigano. He claims he's being persecuted and put on trial by the Vatican because he's been ultra critical of Pope Francis. So whether there's any merit to that, I don't know. It's probably being conducted behind closed doors, but who knows?
Mm.
And then an interesting story in Wales. So, an evangelical teacher in Wales has been trying to sneak creationism into the classroom. Now, in England, apparently it's against the law to teach creationism, but in Wales it's not illegal. But obviously, we have an evangelical teacher who's pushing his narrative. So, we'll keep an eye on that story and see what happens in Wales over the next couple of weeks as this story unfolds.
Yeah.
Then we go to Nigeria.
Mm.
And in Nigeria, a group of Islamists burnt down a Christian church, but the congregants decided they were going to have worship service in the ruins of the church. So props to them for not letting the Islamists, scare them away. They just went and had their services in the burnt out church. And then our last news story for this week is the attack in Dagestan, the predominantly Muslim
Oh.
republic in Russia, that killed 20 people killed in attacks on churches and synagogues. Um, Sadly, I mean, it was, unlike some of the other attacks we've seen against synagogues, the majority of the dead were police, which in itself is a tragedy, but at least we're not seeing a repeat of some of these very, very anti-Semitic attacks on
Mm.
Jewish places of worship. It also included churches too. All right, so now
A-
we move.
and
Oh, go ahead.
and and one priest was dethroated in this attack. That's Dagestan, and it's not. It's better to call Dagestan as an Islamic republic itself. That's what I have seen, because it's a majority Muslim area, and they have seen a rising radicalizing issue, Islamic radicalization, an issue which is being which is a talk of the town in Dagestan since last almost 2 decades. So that's what I have found, and it's a growing threat, which was ignored, or which went over this Putin. So now the blame is upon Putin for ignoring such a warning and all other issues that were underplay. So did you miss a news from Maldives? That is, two ministers were arrested for
I
performing black magic.
I didn't see that.
Yeah, that's an interesting story from Maldives for arresting two ministers, serving ministers, for
I
performing
that
black magic.
That sounds suspiciously like trumped up charges to get rid of a
Yeah,
political opponent.
yeah, yeah.
So,
And see, that's how that's the difference between a true democracy and a religious ruling system where religion plays a larger role, where they even believes in um, using black magic to bring down your opponent. And okay, I think that's a harmless way of
that's
doing causing
it's
a
not
harm.
uncommon. I'm
The
doing some research today.
yeah, do you
It,
find that as a do you find that as a most harmless way of causing a harm?
yeah, I mean, like politics is always dirty, right? Like you've always got
Mm,
people willing to play dirty and to make, bogus accusations and and black magic. Like we know, like this is obviously coming from some superstitious person. We know Muslims believe in jinn,
yeah.
so that if they're accusing somebody of black magic, this is politically motivated, slander. That's
Anyway,
got
that has
probably
gone. Yeah, that has now caused much embarrassment for that whole country because it's been done to bring down the President Moizu. That's what we have seen here.
yeah.
Anyway, yeah, that's so
Well,
cool.
it just reminds me, you ties into so some of the research I did today. So the
Uh-huh.
book that I'm working on the history of the church. So as I'm sure you are well aware, the concept of zero came from India, along with what we call today Arabic numerals, which were Indian numerals. So I was actually doing some research. So he actually became the Pope. So the Catholic cleric who actually is credited with bringing the Indian numerals and the zero to Europe
Mm,
was after his death was accused of magic, right? Because how else can you explain all of the scientific advancements he made with Indian numbers and Arabic mathematics or Muslim mathematics and Al-Khwarizmi's algebra? So like these dogmatic Catholics accused him of black magic because he brought math and science to Europe. So
mm,
it's just a casual relation. So
yeah.
right. So, on to Vicky's question. So we're going to get into
Mm,
our crossfire now, where Hussein and I got to debate a topic which is related to Gaza. So let me get to Vicky's question. So Vicky has asked in the chat, do you guys think that the reports of starvation in Gaza are correct? Absolutely. I mean, the siege has been going on, the lack of aid that has been hindered from getting in. Even some of the Muslims or the Israeli, and I'm going to call them terrorists. They are. These Israeli terrorists have been destroying aid convoys. Again, this goes back the last 2 weeks. I have said repeatedly, this is a human rights issue at its core. You get it down to the base, this is a human, and you have these zealous Israeli terrorists who are destroying aid that are going to Palestinians who are suffering. So yes, I would think that these people are starving. They don't have medical access to adequate medical supplies, their food, water. Yeah, of course they're suffering.
mm.
So
So, when we talk about this famine or this starvation that's going on in Gaza, I think that that's a reality, of course. But at the same time, we have seen the convoys of aid coming into Gaza. So, also at the same time, we have seen these kind of aid trucks and other convoys getting attacked by even the the Hamas militants. They take hold of this aid, which is being which is meant for this Gazan citizen,
the people,
and yeah, and apart from that, they have also we have also seen that they are reselling the aid material in the markets. We have seen the reports. So this is something else which the world needs to know, which
yeah.
is kept hidden from the public. So I find it a little bit upsetting when we always say, or when we are trying to portray a one side as the whole the problem causing agent, and the other one a silly god or silly silly people. That's not right. That's what I'm saying always. So here there are
No, I
two
mean,
people.
there's definitely
Yeah,
there's no
yeah,
one side. This is both sides.
yes.
Both sides are
So
acting
if the famine
atrociously, and both
is
sides are
happening
acting
there,
well.
yeah. So if the famine is happening there, if the starvation is a reality, I'm saying including the Hamas, they are also having a role in causing that. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah. And Hamas
Yeah.
definitely needs to go. I mean, they are a
Yeah.
terrorist organization. They have oppressed their people. They have stolen aid and money that was meant for the people. So yeah, I mean, Hamas definitely has to go.
Yeah.
Their whole conviction that Israel needs to be wiped off the map. I mean, you can't negotiate with these
And we
kind
are
of people.
missing that statement. We are missing that statement that Hamas must go or all eyes on Hamas. We need to get rid of Hamas. If you really wish to end this war and if you really wish to see a prospering Gazan people, the first thing that you should understand and to acknowledge is to end Hamas. But we are not seeing that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, there's been some interesting commentary from Israeli journalists
Mm.
that Netanyahu likes having Hamas around because they're his excuse. That if he it's like, why doesn't God kill Satan? Because then the Bible is over, right? That
Yeah.
Netanyahu likes having Hamas around because he's got a convenient scapegoat. And like, he doesn't have to deal with all his own charges. He can say, hey, don't pay attention to me and my corruption. Hey, we got to pay attention to these terrorists over here. And so that he doesn't actually, and he in his news reports, like he's saying, we need to destroy Hamas, we need to destroy Hamas, but the Israeli journalists are saying, yeah, that's not going to happen,
Mm.
because if he destroys Hamas, then who's he going to blame, right? Because
Yeah.
he does not want a two-state solution. And if you eliminate Hamas, and now you have a legitimate, secularly elected, real, rational government in Palestine, who's going to want a two-state solution. Well, Netanyahu's never going to allow that to happen. So Netanyahu wants to keep Hamas around because it's his convenient little excuse. Now, whether
Tool for
whether there's truth to
deflection.
that, I don't know.
Yeah.
So
It's an easy tool for
okay,
deflection.
yeah.
Yeah.
So anyway, yeah, on to our
Mm.
crossfire. So the topic we've chosen this week is, given the Trump Biden debate this week, which was painful. I only saw out clips or outtakes. I didn't see the whole thing. Well, what
Mm.
if Trump were to win? What does that mean for the world? So my analysis would be, if Trump wins again, because he's in the pocket of Putin, the support for the Ukraine is going to evaporate. And then we saw during the Trump presidency, they moved the the U.S. embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. And right now, under Biden, and many of the Democrats are trying to rein Israel in and get them to stop bombing civilians, et cetera. The atrocities that are going on, the war crimes, as the UN has called them. If Trump gets back in, what then happens now? You don't forget, Trump is elected by the evangelical Christian right, who
Mm.
see Israel as a means to an end. They see the restoration of Israel as a sign of the end times. So now you've got Trump back in office, and you got someone like, was it Anthony Blinken, I believe, is the Biden Secretary of State, who's
Mm.
constantly going back and forth. You get Trump back in there. My gut feeling is the evangelical right is going to throw all of their support behind Israel, and the human rights abuses in Palestine are just going to increase. That's my opinion.
Okay, and I think if that's going to happen, um, a perpetuation of a war in the Middle East, that's always a bad thing for the whole of the international community, for the businesses, and even with regards to the deaths happening for, or the amount spent for the war, the cost of the ammunitions, and even international peacekeeping forces that might enter Israel if it goes beyond a particular time. Even anything can happen. So when it comes to ending a war, that's what, after watching the debate, that's what I got a feeling from what he said. That is, Trump is looking for an end of a war, and he's using that as a an option, and he don't mind whatever things the evangelical Christians are putting forward, whether it be their religious reasons or maybe something else. So putting an end to a war is in a way an important event that will happen. And he was also saying, when I was in the power, the Iran was properly controlled. Iran was under control, and they were not able to fund the uh, the Ha-He-Hu. That's what I say. That is the Hamas, the Hezbollah, and the Houthis. So Iran was funding all these three factions, and they were gaining power, and they were getting all the ammunitions, and they were preparing for a war. And with all such metal, they fired at Israel, and now we are seeing almost a year. The trouble is there in Israel. So he was having a point over there to prevent a war and to stop a war. In that way, I think Trump will lead or will get a few points over there. That's what I say. Yeah,
Yeah. Well, it's going to be interesting to see how things shake out. So,
definitely.
I mean, I definitely don't want to see Trump get reelected and have 4 more years of what the fuck is he going to do now. Um, I just think Trump is an existential threat to this planet. So,
Yeah, but I can correlate with what is happening in India, with what is happening with Trump in USA. That is a all the nationalists who loves their country more than anything, and who wants to see their country prosper and their image. They are so much image conscient, so that's something Trump is able to sell properly. So that's where he is gaining more popularity, and they are trying to, or they are seeing him as a future leader. That's what I can see from that debate, and even after even the news stories that was covering that debate, we can clearly see that kind of an image building. So when it comes to India, Modi, when he is now in the third term of his that governance, he was truly having that kind of an image which he kept with, and luckily we were not having any kind of these kind of issues where we are promoting, or we are beginning, or we are trying to ending any wars. We are just with the Pakistans, and I think we had one surgical strike in Pakistan, in Balakot and other places, where that was something as a retaliation for a strike they had on Indian soldiers, where almost 40 soldiers were getting killed. So, image building and preserving the nation integrity, its borders, and making the people happy. These are the points which a true nationalist leader will put forward, and that is so much uh, uh, valuable selling goods for nationalists. And he's really having that kind of an upper hand.
yeah, well, you reminded me of that quote from Einstein. I'm going to paraphrase it that, nationalism is like the measles of humanity. So I think we need a post-nationalist world, so post-religious world. We need a humanist world. So
But when it comes to the borders, and when it comes to the threat posed by the Islamic terrorism, that phrase, or even that kind of a humanistic viewpoint is getting override by the nationalistic viewpoints. That's what we see in India, in all over the Europe, everywhere. The right wing is rising, the nationalistic viewpoints are rising, even the religious right wings are rising. So all these are
things
we are
always
seeing.
swing, right?
Yeah,
You get a rapid swing to the right when people are disaffected by the left, and then people get disaffected by the atrocities of the right, and they swing back to the left, and then they
yeah,
get fed up with all the leftist bullshit, so it's constantly gonna
that
this will
happens. Yeah.
happen. Yeah.
Yeah,
So
but what I say is that uh, those people who are able to understand this, and the policymakers, they should have it's not an excuse for them to wait for the swings, and to wait for um, causing all the troubles, or letting all the trouble to fall on the people, and then to wait for them to recover. Why? Just take for example the Scandinavian countries. We were all boasting about such countries where religion was not playing an important role in their lives. But now, when we sit today and try to talk about the Scandinavian countries and their beautiful existence, all other things, the first thing what comes to our mind is how Islam is causing a trouble over there, how the religious right wing or the Christian factions are gaining upper hand even in the Scandinavian countries, the kind of problem that they are seeing over there. Why? So the policymakers, if they had a futuristic viewpoint when they were inviting the migrants, and the dangers in pushing the multiculturalism onto a group of people who are never ever having such an idea in their minds. Like, For Islam, there's no multicultural because there is no culture for Islam. That's what the biggest thing is. When you say a cultural Muslim, I always oppose that because you may say cultural Christian, you may say cultural Hindu, but you can't say cultural Muslim because for a Muslim, if you have to practice anything, even as part of your culture, that should have a religious backing. You won't find even a thing in Islam that you do as a part of your culture and which is against the religion. You can do only those things which is having a religious backing, but that's not the case in other religions. You are free to choose from your culture, your land, and other things. So that's why when you look at the Muslims all over the world, they almost look alike. The black cladding, even their way of praying, the language that they use, and the kind of arrogance that they have, everything is almost alike. No way for this principle of coexistence that is not in Islam. It's always the you are proceeding forward by conquering the kafirs. That's the whole idea Islam put forwards and teaches. It's it's applicable to each and every town in this world. There's no national boundaries for that. Yeah.
I wait for the next iteration of our humanity
Mm-hmm.
where we've put all this nonsense behind it, like the Star Trek universe, right? Where we've evolved and we've put all
Yeah.
this nonsense behind us. So, okay.
Mm-hmm.
Vicky does have another question here. She says, why do you think the IDF don't take action against the settler thugs blocking aid? Well, I can answer that.
That's.
According to the one of the Israeli journalists that I follow on Twitter, in the West Bank at least, I don't know about the aid going into Gaza, but I mentioned, I think 2 weeks ago, there have been Israeli settlers, illegal settlers in the West Bank, who, while everyone is distracted in Gaza, the expulsions of Arabs in the West Bank, which belongs to Palestine, have increased. And that these Israeli terrorists are beating up and expelling the Palestinians. And who's standing right there? The IDF is standing right next to these Israeli settlers who are doing it. Now, Israel does have a very high percentage of secular population. Surely there are some secular, non-believing Jews in the IDF who are appalled at some of the abuses that they're seeing. Your question reminded me of a quote which I've pulled up. I mentioned either last week or the week before the book Unmaking of Israel by Gershom Gorenberg, an Israeli journalist, and he mentions that you have within the officer corps, you do have some who are religious. Obviously, you have a lot who are secular, but you do have some ultra religious people in the officer ranks who, and let me, if I can share, if I can figure out how to bring up this quote, because it's an interesting quote.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, present, share screen. Here we go. Is that it? Nope. There it is. All right. So let me, if I can share this. It says, facing the potential for physical opposition, the government must be able to depend on the army. And then we jump down. It is absurd for army affiliated institutions to instruct soldiers to place the political agenda of the whole land of Israel above orders. The fact that the political agenda is shot through with religious beliefs does not justify the absurdity. So we do have in the Israeli IDF, you do have some who believe that, the land of Israel belongs to the Jews, from the river to the sea, as the Palestinians like to say. So yeah, so you do have some in the IDF who are supporting these thugs who are abusing and terrorizing these Palestinians. Now, obviously, yes, the Hamas are terrorists. I'm not talking about them. I'm talking about just the regular people who just want to live their lives in peace. Again, I've said it multiple times. I'll say it again. This is a human rights issue. So we need to get the religion and the nationalism out of this. This is just
Yeah.
people. Israelis want to live in peace. Palestinians want to live in peace. Whether we can do it with all this other bullshit baggage that's attached to it, probably not. But
Yeah. And
that
hope
is the
they
world we
will.
live in.
Yeah. And I hope these Israeli settlers who are blocking the aids and all will be brought forth the international arena where they can be that problem can be addressed, and I see that there's a more chance for Israel correcting that kind of an action because Israel is also image
It's a secular
conscious.
democracy. Yeah.
Yeah, and they are image
Well,
conscient.
there was another issue this week. I believe it was this week, another news item in which a Palestinian man was tied to the hood of an IDF jeep and was being driven somewhere. And of course, the IDF leadership have said these soldiers have obviously broken the rules. You know, we don't tie people to the hoods of cars, and that these soldiers would be investigated and disciplined. So, yeah, I mean, yeah, I think you're right. The
Yeah.
leadership of the military, and a lot of the leadership of the military have been very critical of Netanyahu and the fact that he doesn't have a plan for what's going to happen after, right? You know, we need, like we had the Marshall Plan after World War II, because if you know your history, right, you had Versailles after World War I, which just punished Germany, which led to World War II, which is why George Marshall had the Marshall Plan for Germany after World War II to rebuild, and what we did in Japan, like to help these countries rebuild. Because if you hang them out there, you get exactly what you have in Palestine. You have people with nothing left to lose. So
Yeah.
that's why a lot of the military are critical of Netanyahu, because Netanyahu doesn't have a plan. He has no after action plan for what to do in Gaza. So
So let's hope he will get one
yeah.
very soon. Okay.
Uh,
So
that is the world we
I
live
th-
in. So yeah.
yeah.
Okay, well, thanks
S-
everybody for watching. I appreciate
Yeah.
you guys who've tuned in, the 7 or 8 of you who've stuck around. So, all right, so
Yeah.
thanks for joining, and we will see everybody next week. Any parting thoughts to say? No, you're done as well.
Yeah, we are. I'm done. We
Okay.
can meet
All right.
next week with some more information and some news.
Okay.
Thank you so
Great.
much.
Have
Yeah.
have a great week, everybody, and try not to watch the
Yeah.
news. It's depressing. Thank you. And bye bye.
Bye bye.